how to overcome your fear of rejection and how to handle rejection effectively. If you want to find the right girlfriend or wife, you have to overcome that fear. You cannot get the gold without the dragon. Today, I'll give you practical mindsets, reframes, if you will, beliefs that will help you handle rejection so much more easily. And in essence, it'll allow you to take a lot more action, to create more options for yourself, to increase the probability that you'll have compatibility with the woman that you'll choose. The first frame is the one of compassion. Bit of an unusual one, but it is the ultimate frame. The ultimate frame when it comes to dealing with rejection is compassion. Little story. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a supermarket in Dublin and some dude grabs my ass. Fernanda was there. And then he smiled at me and he goes like this. And I was really angry. I really was not happy about that. I was like, yo, be gay, no problem. Just don't grab my ass. And I was really angry. I was fuming for 10, 15 minutes. It was like, if he would have done that to the wrong person, there might have been violence. I'm a peace-loving person, so obviously nothing happened. And I just removed myself from the situation. I was really angry. And I can recall that anger right now. And then after 10, 15 minutes, I asked myself, what can I learn from this? What's great about this? How can I use this? If you're ever in a situation that's stressful or frustrating, or that provokes any sort of negative emotion within you, you can ask yourself these three questions. What's great about this? How can I use this? And what was the third? What's great about this? How can I use this? What can I learn from this? And so I immediately realized, I realized it because I've had that lesson years and years before already. That's what women go through. And it's not in some virtue signaling way, really not. But in a sense of genuine compassion. There's plenty of women who are made to feel very uncomfortable in a lot of situations. I was like, I don't want them to go through that. I want to reject the dude, his physical assault, basically. A woman should have the freedom to say absolutely no to any person who comes her way that she's not comfortable with. Because I felt that sense of discomfort. And then I realized, it has nothing to do with me. If you get rejected, it actually ties into point number 3 or 4. Don't take it personal. Because she probably just feels uncomfortable. Either you're just really not her type, or maybe your very presence is making her uncomfortable. Even if, by the way, if you're doing a great approach, 19 out of 20 times, she won't be uncomfortable and she'll actually be very happy. But just having made that experience, and I think you're a man who's capable enough of enough empathy to put yourself into that perspective, to feel a little bit of that. Even just assuming the position of her in that moment, feeling empathy, will create compassion within you. And the beautiful thing in that moment is you're actually relating to the situation completely differently, as opposed to you giving the situation a disempowering meaning and saying, I must be utterly worthless. Why would anybody ever love me? I'll never figure this out. All these excuses. And deriving a decreased sense of self-worth from that particular rejection, you just understand, compassion. I want her to reject me because I'm not me. In that sense. For her, I'm not me. For her, I'm just some avatar. She plays GTA from the first person perspective, just like we all are. Life is a video game, and we're all playing it from the first person perspective. I'm just an NPC for her. Just like a lot of people are in your life an NPC. Now, that doesn't mean we need to treat them badly or anything, because ultimately they aren't, but it's a useful frame to adopt. But from her perspective, I'm just some NPC. She's playing Grand Theft Auto, she's playing some video game from the first-person perspective, and for whatever reason, she's just not having it. And even if we were compatible, maybe in this situation, her dog died or whatever, compassion. Because if you come from a position of compassion, I'm not saying that's the only frame. We're going to look at a couple of other ones that are also really useful, because you're not always going to be able to switch into compassion. But being able to come from a sense of compassion, that's actually a very strong frame to come from. It's the opposite of weak. And then you can just move on and say, got nothing to do with me. So anytime you get rejected, if you can come from a sense of compassion, not necessarily for her, but for all people, men and women, just like me, who are being made to feel very uncomfortable in certain situations. Okay, I want everybody to say no to whoever makes them feel even just a little bit uncomfortable. And even if you're not making her uncomfortable, because again, 19 out of 20 times you're not making her uncomfortable, even if she's just like, no, thank you. Just understand the last time somebody approached you on the street and wanted to get you into Scientology or sell you some stuff. Yeah, I don't really like that person. Thank you very much. How would you feel if that person got upset? Imagine a Scientologist comes to you, approaches you during the day, and then gets upset because you don't want to join. You're like, this person is utterly crazy. Even crazier than crazy. He's double crazy. Or somebody's trying to sell you something, and they're like, nah, why don't you want to buy my stuff? Nah. They get angry at you. That's weird, right? You want to be able to say no to that. So that's the first frame, compassion. The second one is not taking it personally. We already addressed that. 3 is her saying no means her saying yes to herself. Actually, a very, very powerful frame. Whenever you say no to anything in life, you're actually saying yes to something more important and deeper and more meaningful. I actually heard Alex Hormozy talk about this in a business context. And I realized, oh, it's so true. When she says no to you, she might be saying yes to her husband, which she might genuinely have. Sometimes the boyfriend is fake, but sometimes it's very real. Maybe she's just saying yes to a part within her that wants freedom, that wants whatever. She's saying yes to herself. And go back to the Scientology example. Go back to the car salesman analogy. When somebody's trying to offer you something that you don't want, you saying no to them or their request for your time, because you are requesting her time, indeed, that is her saying yes to herself. And whenever somebody sets a boundary, that's very, very good for their self-esteem. So a little side tangent. Where in life could you maybe set some boundaries? Where do you maybe have to say yes to yourself and say no to requests for your time? Because people are trying to take your time, especially if you're doing well in your business, your career, or you're exceeding in jiu-jitsu or in chess, or you have some sort of extraordinary competence. People will ask for your time. It's the most precious resource you have. Where do you have to say no? And saying no means saying yes to yourself. So understand, hey, she's actually doing something very, very good for herself. And into that, imagine she was your daughter. Would you not want your daughter to reject everybody who she doesn't want? Exactly. If she was your mother, if she was your sister, okay, it says nothing about you. Next frame. Make it funny. Sometimes compassion is very difficult to switch into. The next frame is just find something funny about the rejection. Like, oh, she must be a lesbian. She must be gay. Because how else could she possibly reject me? It's perfectly fine to temporarily dip into ego. Obviously, most of the time we want to be totally elevated and spiritual. But again, look, in practicality, sometimes that's just not going to be the case. And the only thing you have to avoid is obviously don't be negative to other people, don't be disrespectful to her or other people, but you also want to avoid a self-defeating inner dialogue at all costs. You cannot allow yourself to have an antagonistic relationship with yourself, which you already have, by the way. You're already largely living in a very antagonistic relationship with yourself, not because there's something wrong with you, but just because your inner dialogue, you haven't taken control of your inner dialogue yet. You can change that today, but you have to. And so one way to do that when you're confronted with a seeming piece of evidence that you're not worthy of love, which is ultimately why you're afraid of rejection, in addition to the biological reasons that are anchored in our brain, until we've overcome it, until we've progressively desensitized ourselves, if you realize, oh, well, that's my fear, if you can then temporarily go into ego and say, how could she ever reject me? How can she not know what I have to offer? She must be a lesbian, she must be gay, she must be born from her mother's ass, whatever, right? Whatever you have to tell yourself in the moment. You obviously don't say anything of that nature outright and out loud, but internally, you can have whatever dialogue you gotta have. And temporarily dipping into ego, if that allows you to keep taking constructive action, and then the action pulls you out of negativity, and then you can go back to being inspired by higher level emotions, such as love and compassion and joy. But sometimes a rejection hurts. And sometimes we just need stronger measures to be able to overcome that. Because especially in the beginning when you're not used to it, you can be really, really afraid of it and can really sting. Again, most rejections are going to be fine if you really do it well, because there is a skill set component to it. If you do it well, most rejections are actually going to be easy. But sometimes they're going to rip your chest open and they're going to take a shit in your soul. They're going to do that. 1 out of 20. And it's going to sting. So sometimes we need to have a very resilient mindset, and dipping into ego is perfectly valid for a moment. And also understand that as much as it's a skill thing, it depending on how you do the approach, because the better you get at something, the more receptive she will be. Sometimes the rejection is just a natural consequence of statistics. In fact, if you, okay, let's say I'm going to do 20 approaches over X amount of time, you can know that one or two are going to be rather painful, one or two are going to really, really like you, some are going to be rather positive towards you, some are going to be probably negative towards you. The law of large numbers, or whatever it's called in English, says very few things, almost nothing, I believe. I'm not a mathematical expert. A friend of mine, he has his PhD in physics, he explained it to me, but my peasant brain couldn't comprehend it because I don't have... I got a first-class honors in business as well, but not in math, so I don't have the background on it. But as much as I understand it, nothing in this world happens only once. Things happen over and over again. So if you know from the beginning, oh, if I introduce myself to 20 women over X amount of time, I'm bound to have a couple of really positive interactions, a couple of really negative ones, and then like a bell curve. It's probably going to be a bell curve type of distribution. And it's going to be different for some than for others, and it's going to shift in a positive direction, absolutely, depending on your skill set and a couple of other factors. But if you know that to begin with, then you can just take the actions necessary. There are a lot of ways in which sales is different to dating. For example, in sales, some people say you need to convince, even though that's probably not right. But in sales, there's convincing. In dating, there's no convincing. Dating is a little bit more like marketing, where you communicate a value proposition, you communicate an offer in the most compelling way. And by the way, the product, who you are, is amazing. It's just your marketing sucks. Your marketing sucks. You have no idea on how to communicate the already existing beautiful aspects about your personality yourself at this stage. But you can fix this. So dating is a lot more like marketing. But there are certain similarities, which is, in sales, there's this idea of cold calling. If you work in a B2B context, you have a company, and then your salespeople, they call a bunch of... I used to work for Salesforce, one of the biggest tech companies. And there's a role which is called business development representative. And as a BDR, you largely do one of two things. You send either bashos, cold emails on LinkedIn, or direct emails if you have the email, or you just do cold calls. And when it comes to cold calling, there's just a certain number of calls, 100, 150, 200, that you have to hit dials every single day. And then there's conversion rates. Okay, out of these dials, how many people do I qualify? How many decision makers do I even get through? Okay, how many people do I qualify? How many people? And then you can measure things. But you need a certain amount of volume in the beginning, and then you can measure things. And by the way, in my coaching program, we measure things as well. For example, on Instagram, how many direct messages did you send? How many first responses? How many ongoing conversations? How many numbers did we get? How many first dates scheduled? How many first dates appeared? Second dates, third dates. And when you measure that, then you can see exactly where it breaks down in the funnel. On dating apps as well. How many boosts per week and how many messages sent? The exact same thing. Approaches as well. How many approaches? How many numbers exchanged? How many dates scheduled? Because then you know exactly where things break down, and it's beautiful. And coming back to this idea of cold calling and just hitting it, you need to just get into the flow of it and understand it's going to require some amount of volume. But I'm only going to be able to put in that amount of volume if the process is enjoyable. And the process is only enjoyable if rejection isn't something that I'm battling with and fighting with. And in the beginning, I don't care. For the first 10, 20, 30, I don't care. It can be a fight. You are allowed to vomit. You're allowed to piss yourself, but you're gonna do the approach. You just have to. And you might say, no, but I can't, or I can, whatever. Some people are gonna be able to do it. Some people need to go through progressive desensitization. Progressive desensitization always works because we can learn anything step by step. But you just gotta do it. And in the beginning, it's okay to be a fight. But eventually, because it's not gonna come from today to tomorrow. You're not gonna find your wife tomorrow. It's gonna take X amount of months. For some, it's gonna be 2 months. For some, it's gonna be 12 months. Depends. For some, it's gonna be 2 years. Right? Now, it shouldn't really take much longer than a year if you put yourself really to it. For some, it's going to be 3 months, depending on where you're at. But it's going to require some volume. And for you to be able to take sustained action, you have to enjoy the process after an initial phase where it might be a little bit difficult and there's a little bit of resistance. But then shifting out of that into the next stage is, whoa, how can I make this fun? And you make it fun when you understand, hey, even if I'm not getting the number, I'm still adding value. Because if you give her a compliment, most women, 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10, whatever, I don't have the exact numbers on this right now, most women, way more than half, will actually react in a positive way. They say, oh, thank you, but no. It's a positive encounter. Like when you, for example, you can't see it right now, but like when you get approached and somebody, I'm asking Fernanda, when you get approached, I mean, obviously you tell them of my superior existence rather quickly, but until then, it's still cool, right? It's still a compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah. How does it make you feel when you get approached? Cool?
I'm attractive.
I'm attractive, exactly. Validation,
Yeah.
right? It's validation. And it's completely normal. And we all like, okay, women just want validation. You like it too. I like it too. We're all validation. Now, some like it more than others. And if she likes validation by too many men a little bit too much, it's definitely a sign you should walk away. Absolutely. But it's a cool thing. It's a nice encounter. We're meant to connect to the world. It's funny, Fernanda and I, we actually have that agreement that when somebody approaches her, she can talk to that person for like a minute or two, to not crush their soul, to encourage them a little bit. Because how on earth could I, with any integrity, stand here and encourage you to connect to the world and to approach, and then just contribute to an overall net negative by asking Fernanda to give these guys a bad time? So just like, what do we do? Like 1 or 2 minute conversations or something? And then what do you say?
So I try to include you to the conversation.
Oh yeah, you dropped me. How do you do that? She tries to include me in the conversation. How do you do that?
Usually when they ask, what do you do for work?
She says, usually when they ask what do you do for work, she says,
I work with my fiance.
I work with my fiance. Boom. Amazing. Did you get the ring in? Did you get in? Amazing. Yeah. So that's very cool and very healthy, right? But like obviously then these guys, like they don't walk down. They will they feel like good afterwards, right? They don't feel bad after you tell them that. Exactly. Because that's also, look, there are little opportunities for us to contribute something to the net positive wherever we can. But ultimately it's going to come down to that person's mindset, long-term mindset, and their approach and the feedback they're being given on their mindset as well as their approach. That's going to determine whether they'll be able to take long-term strategic action to get enough options to actually then choose the right person. But for you to enjoy that process, you have to know, okay, I'm actually adding value. Every approach is not just for you. And you're actually shaping future generations and you're doing it for her. It's a total win-win-win. It's for you, it's for your future wife, and it's for everybody you get in contact with. Because the woman gets a compliment, she feels better, other people see you do this, and the people who see you do this, there's one of two reactions. By the way, part of your fear of rejection is also you don't want to be rejected in front of other people. That's also largely what it is. Because if it was just you and her, it's one thing. But you're like, oh, what if I get rejected in front of these other people? It doesn't matter, completely irrelevant, right? Conor McGregor said this. Who's awesome, by the way, if you rise up in the world, there's one of two reactions you're going to get. People are going to drive inspiration or desperation. I'm paraphrasing. They're going to talk bad about you because you're a symbol for everything they could have been and chose not to be. You're an example of self-actualization that they have unconsciously or consciously chosen not to pursue. And so in order to justify their existence and their flaws and their inadequacies in front of themselves, they now have to attack you. There's two ways to build the highest building in town. To build the highest building or tear everybody else's down. Or you just draw inspiration from it. When I see somebody do an approach, we saw one in Temple Bar, was it a couple of weeks ago? Oh, it's clearly visible. You even said he's doing an approach. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was really cool. He was like, you're like, what, he saw the cheeks? You know, she had cheeks for weeks. That's a friend of mine would say. And it's actually a very, very beautiful thing if you see people connect with one another. When you train yourself to want people to win, life gets better. So the last frame that I would offer you on how to overcome rejection, there's actually 2 more, is expose yourself to the stimulus so often that it doesn't hurt anymore. You can take so much action, get into so much flow that there's zero fear of rejection and zero pain after the rejection. Really. You can actually make it temporarily disappear. Now, if you then don't do any approaches for a couple of weeks, the approach anxiety comes back a little bit. But if you just take massive action, you can override the thinking mind. If you take massive action, you can get to a state where you have zero fear of rejection. You have approach excitement. You're really excited about it because no matter what, you're going to win. No matter what. Because you cannot control the outcome. If you make the number or the Instagram exchange the sole criteria of success, you're doomed to feel bad about yourself. If you make the criteria of success in the beginning, the fact that you approach, every approach is a success no matter what happens, because that's the only thing you can control. If you ask yourself, what can I control? And then you act based upon that, you will feel certain. You will feel confident and you will feel good about yourself. Confidence, because it gives you a sense of strength, because you're focusing on what you can control, right? And it makes you feel, it improves your self-esteem, because doing the difficult things builds self-esteem. Self-esteem doesn't come from your uncle kicking you in the head when you were 7 years of age, or your mom dropping you because her mom dropped her and her mom dropped her and it's a generational curse or some nonsense. No. Self-esteem comes from doing the things that are difficult, facing the dragon. And if you face the dragon and then you actually enjoy the process and you take so much action, it'll disappear. You'll feel really, really good about it. Oh, I'm an introvert. The only scientifically documented difference between introverts and extroverts is the fact that introverts get more dopamine from social interactions than extroverts. Seems counterintuitive, I know. But introverts, they get more in a short period of time. Like Fernanda, they're satiated quicker and then they need less. So Fernanda, for example, when we have a house party with friends or something, after an hour and a half, she goes to the bedroom and sits there for 5 or 10 minutes, be like, ooh, little breather, right? It's not because she doesn't like our friends, she's just satiated a little bit more quickly. So most people who think they're ex-introverts actually just haven't learned to communicate and express themselves freely in social interactions. It's really that. You're still fearing the rejection. And how do you overcome any fear? You look whatever you're afraid of in the eye, bam, and you go right through it. You look whatever you're afraid of in the eye, boom, and you go through it. And then the world opens up to you. Because fear can start building walls around you. We've all had situations happen that made us afraid. Places where something bad happened. And if we then avoid these places, then the walls build and build and build. You have to look whatever you're afraid of in the eye and go right through it. And the last frame is get better at the skill set itself. Because by improving your competence, your success rate goes up. And in order for you to have confidence in the process, you need to see progress. Not immediately. You can eat shit for a couple of weeks, that's okay. But over a month or 2 or 3, you need to see progress. If you want me to help you with that personally, click the link below and apply for a free initial consultation. Looking forward to speaking with you soon.